The Nun is directed by Corin Hardy, and this is the fifth installment into the Conjuring franchise. And this movie follows a priest and a young novice who are sent by the Vatican to investigate the death of a young nun in Romania. And while they're there, they confront a macabre force of evil. I'm a pretty big fan of the Conjuring franchise, starting off with the first film, which I think is probably one of the better horror films of the decade. And then you have the second horror film, which I think is probably one of the better horror sequels of all time. And then you have the Annabelle films, which was kind of the first venture into spin-off territory with this franchise. The first film not being very good, and the second I thought was actually pretty okay. And we have The Crooked Man coming out next year. So what we're really starting to see is a bona fide cinematic universe of horror, and one that is probably one of the better cinematic universes out there. And unfortunately, they all can't be winners, because with The Nun, you pretty much get anything but that. I found this movie to be absolutely excruciating to get through. Not only, without a doubt, the worst film in this franchise, but also one of the worst horror movies of this year. The film almost immediately starts off on the wrong foot, and in a way that I actually thought my theater was making a mistake. You know when you're watching a trailer for a movie on YouTube, and sometimes before the trailer they play like a 4-second version of the trailer? It's kind of like a trailer for the trailer. This movie kind of starts off that way. It's this very brief and awkward retelling of what happened in The Conjuring 2 to kind of get us to this point. However, I found it incredibly unnecessary, because you don't need to have seen any of the Conjuring movies to follow what happens in this film. This is a prequel. The entirety of this movie is before any of the other Conjuring films. So I thought the idea that you have to bring everybody else up to speed was completely asinine, completely unnecessary, and very awkward. I also found this film to be very unappealing visually. I don't think that there's an interesting shot in this entire film. The whole movie looks the exact same, with hardly any contrast distinguishing the scenes from one another. All of the sets are very dark. This is a very poorly lit film. They're all drenched in this very thick, heavy fog. This movie looks like it was shot at a local haunted house park for Halloween. This film is also littered with poorly written dialogue. Oftentimes, I found myself laughing at this film when I'm not supposed to be laughing at all. It's so weird. At times, this movie is one chainsaw hand away from being an Evil Dead movie. I swear to God. And the worst part is, it's so obviously unintentional. They're not trying to do that at all. And there's one line in particular of this film that reminded me of something that Ash would say, almost like this moment from Army of Darkness.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
That doesn't fit the tone of this movie at all. I love a good horror comedy. It's actually my favorite genre in film, but when you have a horror movie that is supposed to have these moments of terror and they actually come off pretty funny, it's kind of a bad look. But worst of all, the biggest offense that The Nun has is that every single scare in this movie is so unacceptably predictable. There's not a single scare in this movie that I couldn't see coming from a mile away, and it's because they broadcast every single scare in this movie with practically neon lights alerting you, counting down to when the scare is going to happen in this movie. The music gets really quiet, and when it's just silent enough, something pops out. It's the oldest trick in the book. I've seen it in 100 horror movies, and this movie is full of moments like that. And when you intersect that with these just ridiculous moments of dialogue, there's almost no effective atmosphere to this entire film. And as a result, rendering any chance that this movie had at being creepy pretty much at zero. The Nun is not only the worst film in this franchise, but it's one of the worst horror movies of the year. It is filled to the brim with absurd dialogue, incredibly poorly executed scares, and a narrative that I found should just be inexcusably dull. Around the 1 hour mark, I was yawning, I was checking my watch, because it feels like I've seen this movie 100 times. I was really disappointed to see this movie. It's probably one of the most disappointing films that I've seen this entire year, and I really like this franchise, like I said, and so it's a bit of a letdown to see this movie just be a complete and utter failure. So did you guys see The Nun? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, you can click on the link down below and subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. And guys, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.